All right, and our next game is the legendary ghost-themed Maze 'em Up, where you play as a gobbling face that consumes pellets, and that is, of course, oh shit for the Commodore 64, I believe. I played that. What were we playing? Right, we're playing Pac Man.
Never heard of it.
Aw, come on, man.
Goddamn millennials ruining everything these days.
Oh! I was hoping you wouldn't take it there. I'll allow it this time.
It's going straight to it. So yeah, that was legendary game Pac Man, developed by Namco, which I guess kind of selling the game short because it's more like 2 or 3 people at Namco. It's not some mythological like ultra company thing. It's just that. It was published by Namco in Japan, and because nobody thought it was going to be successful, it was published by Midway in the US. It was first released in the arcade. The date that I've got here is May 22nd, 1980. Now, can I quickly confirm, in Japan, is that the official release date, or is that the official first location date? Because I know that they did location tests first, which I think they often call their first release, but the general release was much later. Well, a few months later, I think. I'm not sure which one we have here, but that is how it is. And we do have a special guest with us today to talk about Pac Man, and that is our regular host, Xerxes.
Oh, yeah.
Hi.
What's up, kids? I'm glad I could make it to my own show.
Impressive. Gotta give him credit.
Yeah, what can I say? So I showed up for Pac Man. Yeah, well, I mean, what could be said about Pac Man?
Who wants to start on, Pac Man, it's the game that is probably the most important game released maybe ever, arguably. So
it is. It's interesting. You know, here's probably the best thing you can. Well, not the best, but the highest praise you can give to Pac Man, in a sense, is to say that despite games like Super Mario Brothers and Doom and stuff like that, when you say video games to like the average person on the street, if they don't play video games, like they think Pac Man. I think
it's Pac Man. You know,
like Pac Man is still like the default video game.
It's really interesting because, you know, I think especially Americas and probably in Japan, you know, the default console for ages was the Nintendo. It was, you know, the Famicom was the Nintendo, whatever. So that's the default system. And even though the main game on that is essentially Mario, it's not the default video game, though. The default video game is Pac Man. Yeah. It's always Pac Man. It's really not hard to see why, because this original Pac Man release was insane. This game did such impressive numbers. I have the number here because it's on Wikipedia and it's really easy to find. Over 2 years, you know, 1980 to 1982, Pac-Man made over $1 billion. That is not adjusted for inflation.
Yeah, Pac-Man, I think rightfully so, deserves its place in history because really its only competition is maybe Space Invaders. Maybe.
And that was slightly more of a Japanese phenomenon, I believe. Like, it went insane in Japan and did well everywhere else.
I mean, Space Invaders is a big hit everywhere. I mean, I think it was just like, it was the Japanese arcade game that took off in Japan, and that's why it's so well remembered, because it was their thing. And before that, video games, you know, were not necessarily like synonymous with Japan, which was the case after Space Invaders, and especially after Pac Man, for the next 15 to 20 years, which is incredible, you know, for a you know, per capita, like a pretty small nation. But yeah, I mean, the thing about Pac Man is so, I mean, do we even need to describe Pac Man? I know I've gotten in trouble for saying this before, but do we really need to?
Well, I described Pac Man kind of artificially before, describing apparently the MVS smash hit, oh shit, but alright, I mean, we should probably talk about Pac Man in the basic sense that you play as a yellow hockey puck that eats dots in a maze and eludes a series of AI-controlled ghosts.
Right. So that's well, not AI, but a AirSats AI type thing, like a pseudo AI. Yeah.
Well, AI is it's either a true AI or it's not true AI. No video game has true adaptive learning AI. So I mean,
I would say AI, like the definition of AI would be like problem solving capability, and they definitely don't have that. They just have
it's definitely pseudo fake
pseudo AI in the sense that they do stuff that seems like they have personalities, but it really is just like code.
Cal, are you saying that this character you play as, he is some kind of puck-shaped man? A puck man, if you will?
We're definitely going to go down the route of let's change the name of Puck Man.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. This is, this is a very famous story. But yeah, when Namco was going to bring this over to outside of, send this outside Japan to English-speaking territories, somebody wisely, it was originally named Puck Man because in Japanese, like, is a language that's heavy on onomatopoeia, like, words that are just sounds that turn into verbs type thing. So pucka 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 is the sound of like chewing, like muncha 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 or something.
and it's
Or
the sound
nom, nom,
Pac-Man
nom, nom, nom.
makes.
That was so it's called Puck Man, and in the Japanese sense, when they read Puck Man, they think pucka pucka pucka. They think that extra U sound at the end. But when any other culture that understands even the slightest bit of English looks at it, they're thinking like, oh, that's they're dropping the F-bomb there. So like, they know that when they see Puckman that some enterprising young gentleman is going to turn into Puckman.
A jerk.
And and so that was smart that they changed it. And now at this point, even in Japan, sometimes you see it as Puckman because
I thought that they basically
paku is the sound.
Canonically changed his name to Pac-Man.
To Japan, it makes no difference because they only have one vowel sound per vowel in a sense.
Yeah.
So paku paku paku, to us, you could spell it paku paku paku, and it makes a difference with the U, but to them, it doesn't make any difference. It's paku paku paku. So they don't care how they spell it.
I think the name change was also kind of super important because, to me, Pac-Man is it doesn't sound Japanese, but it's an interesting name. I think if they had to call it, even if they call it, like, not just Pac-Man, which sounds kind of stupid, like maybe it's a hockey guy, it doesn't really...
Even when they say it, they don't say Puckman.
Yeah,
it's
they
always
say Pac-Man. And I think that Pac-Man probably wouldn't have gelled as well. I feel like I don't want to like play like a race sort of thing, but I feel like if you'd seen a game called Pac Man, you'd be like, I
don't know whether it would have mattered in the end, but yeah, I think because at this point, Pac-Man is so ubiquitous that here's the thing about Pac-Man. All right, so how many Pac-Man games are there? When you think about it, not really that many. There's a lot, but for how popular the character is, not that many. When Netflix started putting out its own TV shows, one of the kids shows they created was a Pac-Man show. And this is probably close to a decade and a half after the last popular Pac-Man game. Think about that, like broadly popular Pac-Man game. Maybe even more than that. And that's how popular the character is that my son, who barely is cognizant of like the Pac-Man, like the games, knows the character pretty well, just because it has an enduring appeal. And there's something about the design of the character, although it is basically just a like circle with a slice cut out of it, is really impressive in the sense that it has it is its own shape. Like nowadays, when people describe like old style like Mickey Mouse pupils, that you see like the characters have like a pupil with a little chevron cut out of it, they call them Pac-Man eyes.
Doesn't Pac-Man himself sometimes draw him with Pac-Man eyes just to really mess with
his head? He usually is. He usually is.
Imagine if your iris looked like your mouth. That's confusing.
It's crazy. It's crazy when you think about it because the only consistent design for Pac-Man is the circle with the wedge cut out of it. Every other representation of Pac-Man is always different. Like
he generally has red boots. Art, that's probably the closest thing you get.
Oftentimes boots. Sometimes he's got a little Robin Hood hat. Sometimes he's got a little bowler cap or something like that.
Yeah, taken from Pac-Land, the animated series, which then got a game based off of it.
Wasn't it the other way? I thought Pac-Land was a game.
Right, you're probably right. I can never. remember.
Pac-Land was they based the character design on the American Saturday morning cartoon.
All right, so
it came out in Japan,
really did.
And then when it came to the U.S., they redid some of the visuals and music to be close to the actual cartoon.
And sometimes Pac-Man has like a big long nose. Sometimes he doesn't. And also the ghosts always have a little bit of changes here and there. But the design is so important to this, and that's why I think the character design is a huge deal here. Because before this, in video games, what did you have? Like even the most popular game would probably be like design-wise would be the Space Invaders Aliens, which there is no default Space Invaders alien shape. There's like just a general shape that you can have it like there are emoji, that are non-copyright infringing Space Invader emoji, because you can do any variation on the thing and people know, oh yeah, video games, yeah, right, got it. But with Pac-Man, you can't really do that because the characters cannot be genericized in a way, I guess.
There's no doubt with Pac-Man that this game approached, and I think it's just hugely important for what Pac-Man is that it approached, and the creator of the game, Toru Iwatani, I hope I got that right, basically said I was making a game kind of to be appealing. I wanted the character to be appealing, and he does sort of say for ladies, for women, for people that were going to arcades with partners, or just kind of, they were going to arcades, but there were no games for them. He's like, they don't want to play these games. I'm going to make a nice, roundly appealing, fun sort of character, and that's why, the colors of the ghosts aren't like evil colors. They're just like pastels for, like, that's not normal ghost colors, is it? No, they're pastels. And so when you get this, it's like, okay, so it is actually very roundly appealing, and people see Pac-Man and they're like, oh, that's nice. I want to see what this game's about, because it's not a sport game, it's not a violence game, really. It's
that's
just
a good point you make. This game is basically for everybody. Anyone can get into this game and enjoy it, no matter what they are.
I think that's kind of the key to Pac-Man's success. Other than look, Pac-Man's an excellent game. It's extremely well designed, but I think the fact that anyone feels like they could just walk up to the machine, and then it's like, okay, what do you do? Okay, you only have one stick, and you can only go 4 directions, and you're like, all right, that's nice and it's simple. I can follow that. The cute little yellow guy runs from these cute little ghosts, and I can follow what's going on, because everything in this game is super easy to understand. Like, you get these pellets, they disappear. I guess I gotta get more. There's a big pellet, it must do something different. It does. It lets you eat ghosts. Then the ghosts go back to their spawn house and come back out. Everything just fits so easily for someone who doesn't understand games, and it's appealing to someone who doesn't want to, engage with, even something like Pong is kind of like, oh, it's a competitive game. It's a competition game that you have to, you have to beat other players at. Whereas this is just do as well as you can, and then you get to eat some ghosts, I guess. And that's really nice.
Yeah, I just wanted to backtrack a bit to the appeal of Pac-Man's design. For how simplistic it is also very iconic. Like, even for its time, it's just something that immediately stood out, and through all the modifications have stood the test of time, and I just wanted to throw some arbitrary shade towards modern games, but I think we would all agree here that Pac-Man is more iconic than, I don't know, Nathan Drake or Marcus Phoenix or any of those modern-day humanoid gruffmen jagoffs that just became, like, the cookie-cutter template for the video game protagonist for, like, the last freaking decade.
Well, I mean, Sotenga, though, to be fair, like, how do you have, a realistic-looking person type of character that is iconic? That's
I don't
a pretty
understand
tough thing. You got to give him some unique piece of clothing, or give her some kind of, like, crazy hair color that nobody else has, or something like that. And it's just not possible with the level of abstraction with the early arcade games. It was possible, but I think more to the point, what you're saying, Sotenga, I think is accurate even back then in the early 80s. How many early 80s arcade games have that kind of iconic character? Like, I'd say maybe like Donkey Kong, definitely. Dig Dug, maybe.
Well, I think part of it is what you'll notice if you go back and you look at a lot of 80s games, especially post Pac-Man games. There's so many that saw Pac-Man and the Pac-Man game, and not just, they didn't necessarily make maze games, but they were like, all right, we need a cute character, we need like a approachable character. So you have these like thousands of these monstrosities that are kind of like some person who really doesn't understand appeal, but is trying to make an appealing character, and they're all these like,
well, even Namco fell victim to this in a sense.
Yeah.
Like Rally X. In the sense that it's not just a maze game, it's a, and I can't take credit for this, so this is definitely a Jeremy Parrish thing, but he pointed out that Pac-Man is a territory claiming game, where you're eating the dots, and so what you're really doing is you're claiming the territory. Namco made a lot of territory claiming games after this. Rally X was a big one, I think.
I wouldn't count Rally X. I got information about this. They were in development at approximately the same time.
They probably was approximately okay. But there are other games like Make Tracks and stuff, not necessarily Namco games, but they were still doing games like this for a couple of years. Like we call them maze games, so they're really territory claiming games.
Well, even like Q-Bart is basically that at its core.
Would you say that in a way though that Splatoon is the current most evolution of territory claiming? Because that's literally how the game works.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's elements that, even if you, especially, and this is something that people like to point out about Pac-Man, if you take a lot of games and you just sort of tilt the axes to above, you start to get Pac-Man, because essentially you've got mazes that you move through, and especially if you got something like Splatoon, where you actually just see the map from above, it does become a kind of competitive Pac-Man in its way. And they have really good on Nintendo with the Splatoon characters, because those are really genuinely distinctive.
You can still do it in 2015. Most game developers are just lazy and want everyone to look like Sam Worthington for some
Well,
reason.
it's not laziness as much as it is. It's very difficult to sell a new idea to people, and if you have
I guess.
Well, yes and no. I mean, you look at like what's the still the big shooter on the market now, even now, like probably a year after the fact, is Overwatch and stuff like that. It's like those are they really tried hard to make those characters look like you could spot them by silhouette.
Yeah, and I think that worked out.
Special because that's also by Blizzard, who are a company that are just they're just like, okay, here's our game, buy it, and they have a.
I mean, but they tried to make it because they knew that would make the game more accessible.
No, it's very very clear, good effort from them. So one reason that these games and even Overwatch kind of will struggle to be as distinctive is Pac Man didn't just make $1 billion. It sold $1 billion worth of merchandise as well back in the 80s.
Right.
So,
which I think is all from the strength of just the really crude but effective character design. It's a game that has a personality, which is something you can't really say about pretty much anything that came before it.
Anything about like the ship from Space Invaders, can you?
No, you can't. I think that's right, Bob.
We do have Donkey Kong, but that came the next year. We also have The Adventures of Robbie Roto. That came next year. If anyone remembers Robbie Roto, I don't know.
Well, the trick with Donkey Kong is I don't think it's nearly as approachable because there's so much extra complexity in that game. Like, I won't say it stole iconography, but it is basically the King Kong iconography that has been shifted into a game.
Yeah, that's the thing. It was the very first game ever that we know of to have Mario in it, and he wasn't even the focus. He'd have to wait 4 years to become arguably the greatest video game character ever.
Yeah, at that point he was just Jumpman, and it was kind of like a weird. But I mean, let's not really like we're kind of selling Pac Man short by skipping straight ahead to Donkey Kong, and Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong is a year later, but it basically is. It's the same thing as Miss Pac-Man, which I think is the elephant in the room here, which is Miss Pac-Man is everything Pac-Man is, but 1 billion times better. But it can't, that and Donkey Kong both, I think, can't really, somebody would do this eventually, but they can't really, they're both building on what Pac-Man did in a sense of creating a cartoon-like environment that is compelling to players.
This game didn't have to be as good or as kind of future-proof as it was. This game could have been, I really genuinely think, about 50% worse, and it would have done just about as well with its art and its sort of the time when it was released. But the game is incredibly solidly built, and the way that the AI works is superb. The fact that they've designed the ghosts, so one ghost, which is of course the red one, Blinky, he's basically always hounding your ass. Like he's on the back of you all the time. But the other
I think
ghosts,
that's why he's called the Shadow, I believe.
Yes, he's called Shadow in the English version, and they much more direct Chaser in the Japanese one. And I think Pinky, which is is called Speedy. I think Pinky's trying to end up in front of you most of the time.
Yeah, Pinky keeps trying to quote Slim Pickens, head you off at the pass. So
you have this constant sense they're actually trying to get to you, which I think is something that even Donkey Kong itself, Donkey Kong doesn't really have that kind of, it's not adaptive AI, but it like this sort of AI that kind of feels like it's moving around you, into you. The AI essentially in Donkey Kong is there's fire and it moves through the level and barrels bounce. Like this has quite a depth to the four ghosts that I think is a lot more, it's quite compelling for what it is. And, they really thought about it and they went, okay, well, it's got to feel like a chase, but it can't feel like it's unfair to you, and you can't feel like you're also not being chased. Like, there's this really cool thing in this game where they chase you for a bit, and then after a certain amount of time passes, they actually go into wonder mode, where they kind of go back to their corners. So it's kind of like there's moments of tension where the ghosts come in to get you, and if you survive long enough, they actually break off their pursuit, and you get like a little bit of breathing room before they come up to you again. Yeah,
and also the game breaks up a little bit where when you eat the power pellet and all the ghosts turn blue and they can be eaten by you, which is one of the most satisfying things in video games up to this point, but also is a thing that kind of breaks up the pattern of what they're doing, because at that point they all move slower, but they're all moving away from you. Suddenly they all have the same AI in a sense, or the same algorithm, and they're all trying to get as far away from you as they can, but they're moving very slowly. And that's I think also the hunter becomes the hunted thing is incredibly satisfying, and that's something that did not really happen in games to my knowledge prior to this.
And I love the fact that it's a power up, but it's not something kind of really bland, like, oh, now you're in, because not even you're invincible, and it's not like now you have a gun, or now you know, like, it's almost the exact same mechanics that you already had, but you have power now, in a way. Like, it's a lot more interesting than suddenly Pac-Man just whips out a gun and starts shooting the ghosts instead of instead of them doing something. No, they turn blue, their directions flip, and they start bouncing randomly away.
Scared.
And yeah, they go, like, they're scared, and you get the sense that they are running away from you. And the great thing is, because the power-up runs out, you know, you got this bit where you're like, I'm gonna get him, I'm gonna get him, I'm gonna get him, and then he starts flashing blue and white, and you're like, and so you're trying to eat them, and just as you're about to eat them, they're like, okay, I'm a ghost now, and they catch you. Like, no!
Yeah. Yeah, it happens to me way too much.
I mean, okay, so I think we praised this game enough. Before we rank it, I do want to talk about some of the things that it did, in a sense, like the limits to its vision. Forward-thinkingness or revolutionary aspects of its design are undercut by a couple things. So first is the most obvious thing, which we alluded to before, is Ms. Pac-Man. Ms. Pac-Man is everything Pac-Man is, but better. It came out, it was basically like an officially sanctioned ROM hack in a sense. If you want to know the history of it, you should look it up. It's we won't reiterate it for you. It's a pretty famous story.
Yeah,
but basically some people were going to make a Pac-Man hack, and it eventually got picked up by Pac-Man's North American distributor and put out as a quasi-official sequel that Namco didn't actually sanction. But as the decades go by, they've kind of recognized it as being like a really great game that they should probably put out in place of Pac-Man.
Sometimes I think a lot of people confuse their memories of Pac-Man and Mrs. Pac-Man, because Mrs. Pac-Man, you know, very steadily replaced Pac-Man machines, and most Pac-Mans that you can play now are probably actually going to be Mrs. Pac-Man. It's not that Pac-Man's bad, it's just pushed to the side a little bit.
Yeah, Miss Pac-Man is better in every conceivable way. There's not one thing where you're like, well, Miss Pac-Man is mostly better, but it's missing a certain Pac-Man charm. No, it's 100% better all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's
different
not
mazes that change as you progress. I think there's 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm. Sounds about right.
That's the main difference. It's also got these little interstitial cutscenes so that you see Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man meet, and then they have the Pac Baby, and it repeats.
Oh, there are Pac-Man cutscenes, by the way. There's a handful in the regular Pac-Man. They're just not very.
First game to ever have cutscenes that I know about.
I'd say that's one or two. That kind of really gives you something to look forward to more than anything.
Space Invaders 2, I believe, came out before Pac-Man and had a intermissions, because I don't think they obviously didn't call them cutscenes. They're just little intermissions at this point where
sounds
stuff
about
happens.
Right.
But it's all the same. I think this is one of the first games that people also experienced with any sort of intermission. But
that's not really the improvement. The big improvement is that the maze changes each time. So there's at least a few different mazes. I think the number is 4, but it might be just 3. But I think it's
a slight sidebar. You will probably barely see just random arcade machines anywhere nowadays. A sad state as it is. But if you do, more than likely it will be a Ms. Pac-Man machine doubled with Galaga, another Namco classic, which we actually ranked before. The Ms. Pac-Man Galaga craze was fairly prevalent in even places I knew about. But arcades are probably deader than dead nowadays. It was something for a while.
Those are 2 of the best early arcade games ever, if not the best, prior to Donkey Kong and Mario Brothers and stuff like that. But anyway, the point is, but here's the thing: even Ms. Pac-Man dropped the ball in a sense, because both Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man, the versions you're most likely to find in arcades nowadays, if they aren't just reproductions made by Namco, official reproductions, you go to any one of those barcade type setups where you find they get vintage arcade machines they buy at auctions and flea markets and stuff, and there is I would say probably 70% chance that if you find one, you're going to be playing a ROM hack. You're going to be playing a speed up hack. A lot of people don't realize this, but both games, the most common versions to find are speed up hacks.
I have actually played one of these all the way back last time, several years ago, when I was at Wildwood, New Jersey. There's one of those in one of the buildings by the boardwalk. It was weird. It was, I'd say, admittedly fun, but that is also at the same time kind of bogus that the real games being replaced by this simulacrum.
It's better. It's better in every conceivable way. It is better. The speed up thing, all it does is it speeds up the Pac-Man or Ms. Pac-Man character. and that character moves faster, and I think the ghosts move at about the same speed. So it makes the game a little bit easier, but it also makes it a little bit more frantic. And it's a huge difference, and that's why, the reason why it's really hard, if you're in North America and you want to buy a Pac-Man board or Ms. Pac-Man board, it's probably harder to find an untouched one than it is to find a modded one that has the ROM hack on it. Because people would get this, they'd buy it, arcade owners, and then they would see they'd be selling these mod kits cheap to get it better, because players preferred the faster versions. And to the point where I have been to my home turf barcade, which is just called Barcade Jersey City, is their Ms. Pac-Man is a speed up hack one, and I had a couple beers with the guy who has the record on that machine in particular, and his record is just pornographically huge, and I will never touch it. But he was telling me all these tricks, but I told him, he knows all this stuff about the game. He's like, it's actually kind of two games, early on in the game before it gets too fast, it's like this, and then later on it's like that. And he knows all this stuff about the game, and I busted some knowledge on his ass and said, did you realize the game you're playing is a hack? It's not the original Ms. Pac-Man. He had no clue.
Nice.
This guy who's been playing the game since it was brand new, when I was a toddler. He's been playing Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man since they were fresh off the boat, so to speak. And he didn't realize that, because that's how he remembers the games being. And if that kind of improvement can be made to the games so quickly and so readily, that's a missed opportunity on the designer's part. They never quite caught on. And to this day, when you get a Namco, official reproduction of Pac-Man, or the Namco Museum series and for the PlayStation and all that, it's the slow version. It's the original version, and it feels slow and kind of not so good. Whereas when you play Pac-Man Championship Edition or any of the new,
really good
the current versions of Pac-Man, they all incorporate this. So what they do is they allow you to speed up the more pellets you eat. And so as the longer you play a maze or a stage, the faster you get. And so it kind of incorporates both of those things. And it's a great way of taking the best, and I've never heard them acknowledge this, but I'm pretty sure it's true, is they realized, the versions that in most countries that are the most popular are actually not our versions. They are ROM hacks. So that's something. It's not so much a criticism of the game, but it's more if it was that easy to fix and that obvious, they should have done it. It didn't make the game less profitable. If anything, it made it more fun and more profitable.
I feel like part of early Pac-Man was, if it played faster, I'm not sure it would have... it probably wouldn't have made a huge difference, but I feel like people... when we come and look at Pac-Man, we've played quite a few games. Even new players are going to have played a few games. I don't know, maybe the slower speed was something that they felt was necessary to sort of give new players the ability to even work out how the game plays as such. I think it speeds up a little bit the longer you play. I think the levels get progressively faster.
But the ghosts get faster too. It's just all the speed up hack does, it makes Pac-Man faster from the beginning.
Yes,
and it seems like that's going to make the game easier, and it does for maybe the first 2 rounds, but after that it's your problems are going to be the same, which is that you don't anticipate the ghost movements well enough, and you just run into them. I guess we got to rank this thing, and that was my main criticism of it, is that it could be fixed or made better. It was made better rather easily by basically unofficial means. I mean, this is basically the romhacking.net of its day.
I had read that the American version had been sped up, and I'd read this, but now I'm wondering if what I was reading got confused and had believed that it was officially sped up when it was in fact not.
It's possible. I know. I don't know for sure about the original Pac-Man. I don't know, but it's basically the same thing. Whereas, what was it? Williams?
Published by Midway.
Midway. Okay, Midway.
Yeah, in the US.
Whoever, Midway or the publisher recognized it, and they basically hacked the game themselves. That may be true. I can't remember how it works for the original Pac-Man. All I know is that even Ms. Pac-Man, which was in and of itself a ROM hack, it's almost impossible to find an unmodded Ms. Pac-Man board, because it was further modded from there. So I might be confusing those two, but it doesn't matter, because the principle is the same, which is that somebody who didn't make the game, the unofficial version of the game, is better than the official version. And I think that is something that has to be considered, because a lot of our best memories of Pac-Man are probably from modded arcade boards. If you remember, and it's playing it in the 80s and 90s, you're probably playing a modded version of it.
So the question is, on what version did Billy Mitchell set his high score?
I don't know. I was just thinking about that.
Really?
I'm not sure that he... It's one of those things that it's something that I think a lot of people know. Like, if Billy Mitchell set his score on something, if Namco recognized it, I think they would have had to verify the board. I know that Nintendo does that with Donkey Kong boards.
Yeah.
Does it super matter? I know it might sound like it would, but when you get to that
really,
point...
Because at a certain point, you move so fast, you don't... It makes no difference.
The guy hit the kill screen on the system. I don't think, like, the starting
level beyond the first kill screen. Right, so at a certain point, the game...
Kill screen coming up.
Kill screen coming up, yeah. So at a certain point, the game famously at level 256, is it? I think just because it's an 8-bit
hexadecimal system.
Yeah, hexadecimal system.
Literal end of math that the board can process.
It's actually to do with the fruit. It tries to draw too many fruit, and so it freaks out.
Too many fruit.
Or something along those lines. It is.
I'm sorry.
But okay, so we want to put this somewhere.
So
my real opinion is whether it does or doesn't go kind of at the top.
No.
I mean, I know you're a big fan of Mario, so you just kind of try and put Mario
I'm also a big fan of
everything.
Galaga, but I have to admit that Galaga does not belong in the top 10.
Galaga is a little... I feel it's a little different, because it's not... It hasn't had the same impact as Pac Man did.
It hasn't, but it's also a... Impact is not the only thing, right? So
Pac-Man is really in a precarious place where it is one of the most influential games ever that there isn't really as much reason to play as now, except for historical respect.
I'm thinking over Doom. Is that too high?
I was maybe thinking somewhere like it's somewhere around the spectrum, but
it's a core video game. It is if you want
video game, the game. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yep.
I want to put it below Metal Gear Solid.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm saying that is mostly that, although as important as it is, as great as it is, if you were to say, oh my God, you've never played Pac-Man, what you should do is play Pac-Man? No, you wouldn't. You'd say play Ms. Pac-Man. You'd probably say play a speed-up hack of Ms. Pac-Man, which is the better one. Or you would say play Pac-Man Championship Edition, which is Namco's own creation. It's not hacked, and it is incredible. And it really is. Now, that's years and decades later, and decades of hindsight. But the principle of it is the same, which is that I'm saying that like there are improvements upon Pac-Man. Like would I rank? It's a similar question. If somebody asked us to rank Space Invaders, I would put it below Galaga. Although it's a huge deal, and it kind of did a shooter in a way that I'm not sure shooters would have taken that fixed screen thing. I know they would have existed at some point, but I don't know whether they would have done like the descending rows of enemies. That was pretty unique and cool, and a lot of people copied it. But Galaga is like, don't play Space Invaders, play Galaga, or play Gapless or something. Don't play Space Invaders. And I feel the same way about Pac-Man.
Telling like, that Space Invaders, you don't recommend Space Invaders necessarily, but Pac-Man, it's always just but play Pac-Man, but Pac-Man again. You're taking the same game essentially, and
I mean there would be no Ms. Pac-Man without Pac-Man. I'm not, and just the same as there would be no Galaga without Space Invaders. I'm just saying that.
Or Galaxian.
Well, yeah, but that's.
So I'm being persnickety.
Yes,
but like Mrs. Pac-Man is very much a. Like, you could have discreetly released
Ms. Pac-Man. She's not married yet. Ms. Pac-Man.
Yeah.
They have a child and they're not married. That's scandalous.
Hey, no shaming. It was very progressive for its time. Let's say that. Let's not
struck a blow for women's lib.
There we have it.
Yeah, it's very sad.
But, like, Ms. Pac-Man, you could have discreetly released it as a patched version, and I mean, like, Namco themselves could have just said, all right, well, this is Pac-Man, we're just releasing a new iteration of Pac-Man
1.5,
like 1.5, and people would have been like, yeah, that's fine, that's the new arcade, that's the new Pac-Man board. It doesn't do, it's different, but, it just changes a little bit of the AI, changes the mazes. These are things that, you could do after anyway, it's not.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I get what your point is. I'm just saying, like, I feel like you can't change the fact that the best Pac-Man game is actually not made by Namco. Of the classic Pac-Man games, it's unquestionably Ms. Pac-Man, and beyond that, it's the speed-up hack version of Ms. Pac-Man. It's just crazy. It's weirdness upon weirdness when you think about it. And the other thing I guess I just want to say about like Pac-Man is the reason why I wouldn't another reason not to place it too high on the list is because you don't need to encourage people to play Pac-Man. There's a million opportunities to play it. Everybody knows Pac-Man because it is the most famous.
Do we need to encourage people to play Superman 64? Super Mario 64. Sorry, I said the wrong game.
Fool! Let's encourage them to play both so that you get an idea of what an amazing and a horrible video game is.
Sorry, they have the same name, but we put Super Mario 64 at the top, and it's that is not a game that people need to play because it is.
I disagree. I feel like people are missing something in the evolution of that kind of genre if they don't play Super Mario 64.
I think people are missing something if they don't play a Pac-Man game, though.
They are, but I don't know that you need to encourage... Like, Super Mario 64 is overshadowed by the fact that it's just another Super Mario game. Like, which game do you play? Oh, I'm going to play New Super Mario Bros. I'm going to play New Super Mario Bros. Wii. I'm going to play New Super Mario Bros. Wii U. I'm going to play New Super Mario Bros. 3DS. I'm going to play... there are so many of them. At this point, it's like you got to point out, like, or I'm going to play Super Mario Bros. 3D Land, or you got to point somebody to, like, no, if you're going to play this, like, you should really go back and play Super Mario Bros. 64. It is worth it. It is worth playing. It is a game that holds up, and that's why I would put it at the top in the sense that although everybody knows that character, I think most people who know that character don't know that game anymore.
But on the flip side, other than that, could be an argument for Pac-Man. The fact that Pac-Man, the basic game, Pac-Man, is still a part of, people don't have to go back and play Pac-Man because they're playing Pac-Man right now because Pac-Man is still there in pretty much the exact same way that they made a game in 1980 where its bones, its skeleton is still pretty much the exact same almost 30 years later. Is that not incredibly impressive?
It is incredibly impressive. I just don't know whether you get the same benefit from going back to it as you do with Super Mario 64 or Super Mario Bros. 3. Yeah. But your point is well taken, I think. Which is that maybe I'm lowballing this a little bit, just because I feel like it was so quickly and drastically improved upon. But that doesn't change the fact that somebody had to do it first, and they did it. And you do. It's true. If you say, hey, go back and play the original, unaltered, actual Pac-Man, get an idea, and just.
If you could position yourself in the 1980s mindset at all and play Pac-Man, you'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, I understand why this game was huge.
Go play Asteroids and go play
Tempest.
What else you would have that predates Pac-Man that's worth
Battlezone, around the same
Space Invaders, and stuff like that, and then play Pac-Man. And get an idea. Pong, play that, and get an idea for what games were before Pac-Man, and you'll see the personality of it. And that is something that is worth appreciating, especially if you want to get an idea for what it means to make a. It is the moment where video games not necessarily burst onto the cultural consciousness, but that became a. I think that was the point where anybody who had a brain would have to realize, oh, these aren't going away; these are just going to stick around forever. Although people might have wanted to dismiss it as a fad, you look at Pac-Man, you got to say, like, there is something to this. Like, there is something here that can be built upon and built upon and built upon, and they will just keep making video games forever, whether I like them or not. In the same sense that, like, when they first made the first, like, animated cartoons, right? That it was a novelty at first, but at a certain point, you're like, okay, you got Mickey Mouse. Okay, I guess they could just do this forever. Like, there's really no limit to what you can do with this. I think that's the real greatness of Pac-Man. It was just kind of the first realization of, oh, video games are limitless possibilities for, like,
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about this sort of period of Pac-Man. I really think that before Pac-Man, video games existed, but they were a gimmick. They existed. People were like, oh yeah, that's like any other toy. That's not a medium to which you basically invent everything. And before Pac-Man, video games weren't movies, they weren't music, they weren't TV, they weren't radio, they weren't a thing that was going to be around. It was just like, oh, that's a gimmick for children. And Pac-Man was like, hey, now everyone's going to play Pac-Man. And suddenly it's like, oh, I guess that's it. Now,
Mickey Mouse is a great comparison, actually. Yeah. I didn't do that intentionally. I wasn't thinking about that in advance, but I think that makes sense. Okay, so I'll move it up. So I was going to say below Metal Gear Solid. I'm going to move it up now to below Doom, above Legend of Zelda and Link to the Past. Okay. And the reason why I won't put it above Doom is because I feel like Doom has, in a sense, Doom
has a huge cultural impact in this
lasting impact. Yeah, whereas they don't really make a lot of games like Pac-Man anymore, unless maybe Metal Gear Solid in a sense.
That's why I didn't want to put it below Metal Gear Solid. I'm like, come on, that's like Pac-Man with a plot.
Yeah, I mean, well, yes and no, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I feel like in a sense, like only games like Doom and such could be more had more of a lasting impact on the genre. But Pac-Man has a cultural impact that even Doom can't touch, and even Mario can't touch.
No, nobody can touch it. Pac-Man is like, I don't know, like Kleenex or something. You know, it's just like, oh yeah, it's a brand that's become the thing that it is, and that's
It'll be
crazy
around
for video
forever,
games.
even though, I mean, in a way, it's kind of fitting that we did this after Sonic Adventure, right? Because Sonic Adventure is an example of like, well, the character's not going to die, but the game sure did, and you know, like the character has
like,
a much more lasting impression on. Yeah,
because
people love Sonic
yeah.
the Hedgehog. Most people hate Sonic games. This
you know,
point.
just you play him because you're like, hopefully part of this game will be good.
You
And
want
that's
it to
it,
live
you know?
up to the character, and it almost never does. Just from a statistically speaking, almost never does.
That's fair.
And that's not saying that there aren't good new Sonic games that are being made, but they just don't live up to the promise. I don't get the appeal of Sonic. To me, Sonic always seems like a crude, crass marketing gimmick. But that's because I was the original market. So I'm allowed to say that. Everybody else, though, it sticks with them because there's like a design element to Sonic that I think is really appealing to people. But the thing is, they're kind of in the same boat because like Mario's kind of a crappy character, you know, in a sense, because like they just keep making Mario games and people kind of like him because he's an affable goofball. But
well, Mario's interesting because you can see every single character in the Mario franchise that isn't Mario is kind of more popular with the fan base, not like the game themselves. But you know, it's like, oh, Luigi's crazy and Mario's an asshole, and like Peach is at least something. But Mario is like
kind of a cipher. Yeah, he's just kind of whatever you need him to be. Now he's golfing. Now he's playing tennis. Now he's controlling a breakout paddle. I don't know why. It just is.
Alleyway. Nice reference.
Yes, thank you.
I like that
I grew up
Pac-Man somehow is... Pac-Man didn't really take up a bunch of other things. I know he went go-karting with Mario, but for the most part, he just kind of... He's Pac-Man. He just does Pac-Man things.
Yeah, he's around.
Defined by being the Pac-Man.
He's here. Because video games exist, Pac-Man will survive. I guess really the Mickey Mouse comparison is great because Mickey Mouse, as soon as like Donald Duck and Goofy and Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and all those other characters come out, it's like, who needs Mickey Mouse? He's kind of like a nobody at that point, but he's so famous that he just survives forever because the design, you can pick it out in a silhouette. You can see, you can draw it in like with a can of spray paint. It's so simple that it works and it will last forever just because the design is that good. And I think Sonic is in a sense like that, and Pac-Man definitely is. That's where games went. And, you know, so who disagrees with me about Below Doom? Right below Doom.
I think
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I'm quite good with that as well. I was wondering even if Pac-Man is going to claim #1, but I do have to agree that maybe it's more really historical for anything that's as high as it is. But
I don't want Pac-Man to be considered just historical. I think it's... I'm not going to try and push it any higher, but it is Pac-Man as a character, and this is the game that drove him to the spotlight. But he also drove his own game to the spotlight. It's... You know, it is the whole package here, and I don't... It's kind of a tough one, because it's like, this is a game that came out of the ether in many ways, you know, it's... Every other game in the list, it pretty much almost exclusively had something that it could look back to and say, well, I had that idea, and I took that idea. Pac-Man is just like, let's make a Pac-Man thing, like, they just sort of threw it together from whatever they had lying around in terms of concepts, because it is such an early release, and it is the first truly successful video game character, which is very important.